Hey, what's going on there, Jackson? How's everybody doing? Well, how's everybody doing? How you doing today, Jackson? I just wanted to kind of share something. Uh, the Jayne Avenue meeting had happened yesterday. Well, once again, today's Tuesday, nice crisp Tuesday, and I wanted to kind of talk about what happened at the Jayne Avenue meeting that happened yesterday afternoon, and it was a very pro, productive meeting that President Sakia Summers had conducted. And big shout outs go out to her, Credell Calhoun, his wife, uh, the Jackson Zoo Association, those judges that came out to kind of campaign for their positions on the courts. And big shout out to the Jackson Water Department for coming out and giving some full explanations on what's going on with the Jackson Water. You know, shout out to some of the new community members that had came, but shout out to the entire Jayne Avenue community as a whole, because without the community there wouldn't be no Jayne Avenue meetings and things of that nature. But Sakia Summers talked about the voter registration election issue that we're facing. The redistricting of the voters registration and what we are facing. And I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit because she talked about a few things that I was a little bit concerned about, how they are going to be kind of watching how folks, not watching how folks vote, but they're going to be kind of stopping people from voting. That's what they're going to be doing. And that's something that must be looked at. There was a lot of different things that she was talking about, how they're going to be monitoring how people vote. For example, something that I was concerned about, and it was talking about the credit report and the addresses that they will go by on how you vote. It's called voter suppression. That's the word that I'm looking for. They're trying to create this voter suppression thing. They're trying to get many people not to vote. Now, let me say this. Let me be clear. If you vote, that's fine. But if you don't, that's fine too. That's your prerogative. Nobody, I'm not a full advocate for the way a lot of people on voting, and I'm not saying I'm not against it either. That's the resident prerogative. I don't want no one to. My clear position on it is that if there is someone in there that is effective and that is worthy of the vote, then vote. But if don't vote because I'm not going to vote because it's a privilege for me to vote. I'm going to vote because I want the person that I'm voting for. I want to get a clear understanding on the individual that I'm voting for. I'm not just going in there willy-nilly voting. Not me. No way. That's not possible for me. So that's kind of what I wanted to, I wanted to say that a little. I wanted to say that, but anyway, Sakia Summers was talking about how they're gonna go by your credit report and the addresses that's on your credit report to create this type of voter suppression. And that's where I kind of raise a little concern about, because I'm like, I hark on that all the time on my other page, on my other podcasts. My other podcasts, I talk about debt collections, credit, things of that nature, and people understanding what their rights are. So if you see fit, go on to Blind Intelligence and take a look at that. I hark on that a lot, and I talk about that personal information stuff. And it's funny to me how that's how they're gonna go on to suppress, for this voter suppression type situation. It may just already be happening in other states. It may be happening in other states, because I know Louisiana was one, Alabama's now one, say Florida's one, Tennessee, Mississippi. So I guess it's a Dixie thing. I don't know. That's what it sounds like. Oh, can't forget Texas. Can't forget with this redistricting. Okay, I'm just curious. I'm curious. I don't know too much about it. This is not my expertise. But she explained it without going into the technicalities of it. She had some jargon in there that, kind of might have went over some people's head. But all in all, she was trying to convey what's going on downtown in that legislation. And why is it important that we get out there and we start kind of protesting and kind of, writing letters and things of that nature, and trying to, and exercising, the right to vote. Well, you say it's a right, but I think it's a privilege to vote and register. See, she was also talking about the registration part of it. That's the key. If they suppress voters' registration, it's over with. It's over with. Find a small little stuff, like, for example, she was talking about something like, if you don't have an ID or whatever, the only thing that would suffice would be like your birth certificate, But for me, I'm not too sure about that. It was some things in there she was saying that I'm quite questioning about, because if this is promulgated by the state, and you have a state ID, I think the state ID should suffice, far as the identification of of who you are and your address, because that identification belongs to the state anyway. So so that's why I said I'm not quite too sure about about some of the things she was saying, but I do commend her for disseminating the information. So that's that for that. On that note, and big shout out to Credell Calhoun and his wife Miss Peggy, for talking about sharing their opinions on their political opinions on certain things, and giving up some valuable information. There was the Jackson Water representative came out. She spoke very candidly on how the process of the Jackson Water works, and the different kiosk machines. She even talked about the library. The library is a new place now where you can go and pay your water bill. Oh yeah, I really wanted to hark on that real quick, because in the kiosk machine, of course, the Jackson Medical Mall now has the Jackson Water Department in there, where you can go in there and talk to a live person about your water issue, and the kiosk machine. But my concern was that was it Ada was it was it usable for the blind me, and she said she wasn't sure. That's a concern because it should be Ada compliance. It should be an Ada compliance. I should be able to go in there and use it, because how am I going to pay my bill? What if they didn't have the service where I can do it over the phone, and that was the only alternative way for me to pay my bill? How am I going to get pay my bill? Because I want to do it independently. You see, so we kind of touched on that. I kind of touched on the phone situation, on how their phone situation services is not adequate. They need to change that. And some other residents was talking about the water and different water issues that was going on around the city of Jackson, and different water main breaks and things of that nature that could possibly have an impact on the water bill and things of that nature. And she was very kind to say that if you see a water main break, you need to notify them so they can come out and get that the matter resolved. So big shouts out to the Jackson Water Department for coming out there sharing that information too. The Chancery Clerk Judge and the Circuit Clerk Judge came out, and I think they're up for re-election, and they came out, kind of talking about, their re-election and who they are, introducing themselves. But they come out pretty much all the time, even when there's no election. So, big shouts out to those two individuals that came out, and let me see who else. What else happened? Big shouts out to the new people that's in the neighborhood. We have some new individuals in the neighborhood. I don't remember names, but shouts out to them. And I'm trying to remember now what else happened in the neighborhood. Boy. But mainly, she was basically kind of talking about that voter registration suppression deal, and how the Board of Supervisor, Deborah Dixon, it was kind of a history how she wanted everything to go into one precinct, in which I think Peggy Hopkins Calhoun, Credell Calhoun's wife, talked about it very candidly, but time didn't permit her to get out her point. But I want to say to you, Mrs. Calhoun, I know where you were going when you was talking about that. I know where you were going. Let me tell you where she was going. Your Board of Supervisor, Deborah Dixon, for District 3 was trying to get everybody that had precincts to go to one location, and that was at Black's Chapel. If you can remember that, I'm quite sure you can. And I remember that, and she was talking about how it wasn't enough space in that facility to facilitate a lot of the voters, and then it would also suppress a lot of the older folks who don't drive, that could walk, or some folk that could walk to their polling place to come out and vote. But the main part that she was discussing was the congestion. And I knew where she was going then when she said it was because I understand. And here it is. If you got congestion, a lot of folks are going to turn away. See, the more congestion things is, the more people will turn away real quick. Real quick, they'll turn away. Oh man, that's too crowded. It's too crowded. Just, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you go to a restaurant, you know, and the drive-through is too crowded, you're gonna drive off. You're gonna drive. You're gonna look. You're gonna be like, you're gonna keep going. Now that's too crowded. You know what I'm saying? Same thing with the supermarket. You're gonna see all those folks lined up in the register or the parking lot packed. Like, man, this parking lot too packed. I'm out. So, but I knew what Ms. Calhoun was going with that, about that precinct, that it being at one precinct. How you gonna get everybody that was at the zoo, over at Jayne Avenue, the police academy? I think it was something over in on Clinton Boulevard too. There's another polling spot over on Clinton Boulevard. But if I'm missing something, my apologies. But all of those different polls, she was trying to put them all in one. You know, Board of Supervisor Deborah Dixon was trying to put it all in one, and that was at Black's Chapel, and I'm like, I'm not. I'm not. When it was told to me, see, Miss Calhoun wasn't the only person that said that to me. You know, I was already told that long time ago when it first happened on those reasonings. You know, I was told that privately about that. And I kind of knew then. I'm like, really? You know, so I just wanted to kind of touch base on that, because like I said, that right there is voter suppression right there. Congestion is voter depression. Voter suppression. Let me say it correctly. Congestion is voter suppression. You see, very good strategy. Very good strategy. Very good strategy, but it won't work. And that's the reason why you have to open up your eyes to understand that when you see that happening, that's what's going on too. So, but anyway, shouts out to Sakia Summers for hosting that meeting. There was a lot of different issues that I would encourage you to come out, even if you're not from the West Jackson area. You could be from South Jackson, North Jackson, East Jackson. You're welcome, because this is one Jackson. And what's going on in my neighborhood could happen in your neighborhood. You know, what happens in your neighborhood could be going on in my neighborhood. And we need to talk to each other and communicate, and so we can compare our notes, so we can see. Once again, I want to say this. Shouts out to the Wood Street for going down there to the city council and voicing their opinions on that street change. Shouts out for showing up and showing out. Keep doing it. Don't let that issue be the only reason why you go down there to that city council. Because the more people that's down there, they're going to get it. We're not going. And if you're not representing us the way we need to be represented, you're going to be ousted. It's just as simple as that. And voters, you had some voters, some residents was for it, all for it, but a lot of residents was against it. I'm not even from over there, and I'm against it. You have to communicate with the resident. Everybody that lives in that neighborhood is involved in that process. And as an elected official, you just can't. If I was elected official, I'm not finna willy-nilly just do something off the cuff because I feel. No, come on, no. Let's talk to the resident. They are the most important part of this process because they're the voters. They can vote you in and they can vote you out. So, once again, I want to say shout out to Wood Street. Wood Street really showed. They showed up and showed out. They gave the example of how the residents need to come out and voice their opinion down there at that city council. You know, whether the city council is right or the city council is wrong. Get out there and voice your opinion. Voice your concerns. And that's not just for Wood Street was an example. Wood Street was an example. So, but that's it for me. I just wanted to kind of harp on this for a minute. I'm finna be out. Thanks for watching. I'm Raphael Bird, and welcome to the 601 Network.